Good morning, everyone. I'm going to hold the mic and the clicker and maybe do a bit of walking. Though the accent sounds pretty familiar, I grew up in a town called Tipton. I've been in Canada for the last 30 years, and fortunately did pick up that accent. I actually was just inspired by that presentation, and I was just wondering whether I was going to be second, third, or fourth, because I was going to redo my whole presentation based upon that one. But I'm going to take you on a journey, tell you a little bit about what we do at the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association in Canada. We are a trade association, and try and bring it back into cybersecurity. And I'm so glad to see so much around the topic of cybersecurity, because it is a critical conversation for us to have. The APMA has been around for 71 years. We are a trade association. We represent companies like you see behind me that are parts manufacturers. I've been there for 5.5 years. The changing face of our sector is more auto tech companies. Less companies bashing metal, less companies injecting plastics. And so with that, we've tried to change how we adapt and how we perform as an organization. Whether it's NAFTA 1.0 or 2.0, our association's involved with government, with industry, and academia. That's me at CES this past January, and that vehicle behind me is what we built called Project Arrow. It's a fully drivable prototype electric vehicle. And we built it, again, as a trade association. There was a gentleman I did have to hire. I wanted to have one of the best chief engineers to be able to get this project off the ground. He's local to the area. Some of you may know his name is Fraser Dunn. He spent 19 years at Aston Martin as their special projects chief engineer. But the rest of the team predominantly was Canadian. We received $7 million from the federal government of Canada and $5 million from the feds and $2 million from the province of Ontario. And we built that. It was designed collaboratively through a competition I held with universities in the UK, and Carleton University in Ottawa kind of won the competition. And we called it Arrow because of that thing standing or placed behind me. Back in the 1950s in Canada, we developed something called the Avro Arrow. It was the fastest supersonic jet at the time, preparing Canada for challenges that we were concerned with from Russia, and the northern parts of Canada. We built 5 of those prototype supersonic jets. The 206 engine was being placed into the 6th prototype when the Prime Minister Diefenbaker called the team and said, project's cancelled. And there's a complete mythology around the cancellation of the Avro Arrow and what could have been and what should have been. And so we called our project, Project Arrow, because it's really a tip of the hat to the innovation that Canada's been kind of leading for many years. But the problem with Canadians, at this point I've become British again, the problem with Canadians is just too humble, just too nice, don't never necessarily want to be on the front of anything. They're always quite happy to be in the back of many things. 260 of these scientists and engineers went to NASCA, which then became NASA, and put people in space and on the moon. 13 of them came across to the UK and worked with the French and did Concorde. But most of you won't know that. Because that's the way Canada does things. But then they got somebody like me, a Brit born and bred in Tipton, who went over there and suddenly puts them on the map. And so Avro Arrow, or Project Arrow, has really been getting a lot of accolades with the academic institutions. We built it at a university. With industry, we had 534 companies want to be a part of the project. One of the key things for me on the project was cybersecurity. I have zero backgrounds academically or even professionally in cybersecurity, but today I chair the cybersecurity committee for the APMA. I'm also the co-founder of an organization called the Global Syndicate for Mobility Cybersecurity, simply because I know how absolutely critical, it's a foundational area of expertise that everybody needs to embrace, whether you're injecting plastics or bashing metals or making electronics, you have to begin to embrace cybersecurity. And it's a tough conversation, I'm sure a lot of you agree. Well, on the project, I invited 7 Canadian companies to kind of provide a complete cybersecurity solution. And knowing I've got a limited amount of time, I'm not going to go into the complete detail, but as I click through these 4 kind of tiers, you'll get to understand that I'm trying to secure the data that's being generated on the vehicle between the electronic components, the data that you and I are sharing with the vehicle as a passenger or the driver, and then we're all moving into the V2X era, where the vehicle's communicating, whether it's with the grid or with other vehicles or with the infrastructure. So the 7 companies provided that complete solution on the project, which was critical. And this is the part I was about to change up. I'm looking over at Gunny because of what I just heard, and I wanted to talk more about innovation, because I'm currently doing a whole series on LinkedIn called Design Thinking. It started because my background is I'm an industrial designer, graduated from Sheffield University in '93, and today I'm the CTO, and I'm having to kind of work in areas which really I wasn't qualified to do so. How did that happen? It's called design thinking. It's a brand that was kind of coined by Yale University in 2013, but it's innovation. It's how do you think about problems through an innovative set of lenses. And it doesn't mean you have to go to design school to do it, but it does help. Why? Because in 2002, China had 7 design schools in the whole of China, and the government said, we are no longer going to be a nation of manufacturers, we want to be known as a nation of innovators. Today, ladies and gentlemen, today they have more design schools than the US, UK, and Canada combined. Let that sink in. That's 230 if anyone's worried or interested. US has 217, UK has 97, Canada has 12 design schools. And a lot of my prototype parts, not only my prototype parts, but also Porsches and also Aston Martins are made by a company in China. And I'll tell you, the quality, the timing, and the pricing, untouchable. And so that nation decided to go down that road. The next nation that's about to do that is India. I was meant to be in India next month, but I got an email yesterday saying it's off because of the rigmarole going on between my Prime Minister and India's Prime Minister, if any of you have looked at the news over the last few days. So we've got some differences of opinion at the moment, but I was meant to be in India talking to the Indian government around design thinking. And so, look, again, I'm going to share slides on there, but I'm going to be talking about something completely different, because you guys know what needs to be secured on a vehicle, everything from PCUs to the electronics. But I want to talk about innovation here and say, look, Britain was leading in innovation, you know, after the Second World War, all the way through to, let's say, the 90s. The number 1 product in your house from a brand that everybody wanted was called Sony. Whether it was a Walkman we carried around or whether it's the VHS player that used to play our videos. Sony's design studios were full of Brits. Like, we were everywhere. We were in Japan, we were in the US, we were everywhere. But suddenly things changed. Like, attitudes changed. It doesn't mean people catch up. It means, I think, we kind of changed. Sometimes you kind of take your foot off the pedal, as they say, and it suddenly you find yourself, like the UK currently does, you know, where they're now guessing, like, okay, how do we now try and, you know, continue and further certain trade deals to be able to get an edge on it? Look, the potential's here. You've got the right schools, you've got the right mentality, but there's definitely a gap now. The rest are catching up, as they say, and when India starts to awaken, and they've awoken, there's going to be a challenge here for the West, and that includes Canada and the USA. Semiconductors is something that I'm getting pulled into at the moment, and I just learned a few months ago that 66 to 90% of the world's semiconductors are made in Taiwan and made by one company. Let me just throw out a stat that 0% of advanced semiconductors are made in North America. 0%. But the US have just awoken to that, and they've created what they call the Semiconductor Act, and they've said they're going to put $1 trillion into it. Canada said we'll throw $3 to $5 billion into it, and those of you who know fabs, you know, that's a $25 to $50 billion investment. And I hear today that, you know, the UK has thrown out $10 billion, which, you know, means you may get the reception portion and maybe the front end of a fab, but you don't get any of the manufacturing. And so these are conversations that we have to have, but it's a collective conversation. So why am I talking about semiconductors? A guy who's an actual designer gone wrong, who's now a CTO. the reason I'm having the conversations or I'm getting pulled into it is because we're saying the strategy in Canada has to be that we align the semiconductor conversation with automotive. Canada has assembly plants for the Detroit 3. Stellantis, Ford, and GM build their vehicles in Canada as well as the USA. Honda's there, Toyota's there, and VW's just announced and they're building their biggest gigafactory. Actually, it's the biggest gigafactory in the world for building batteries in Canada. Why? Because Canada typically has the best ratings. J.D. Power's Platinum Award, Canada's assembly plants win that more than the US and even the Japanese. Our Toyota plant in Cambridge, Ontario in Canada has won it 4 times, which means it's been better than the ones in Japan 4 times. Let that sink in. Great skill sets, over-skilled labor. But what we're saying to the semiconductor folks is, if you want to get government to buy in, align your conversation to automotive. And I know there's been a challenge here with Brexit and the moving out of the EU and then the loss of some of the automotive assembly plants and OEs moving to Europe. You have to rethink yourselves. You have to rebrand yourselves, right? Because you're in a situation which is a challenging situation. But there is a collaborative conversation to be had here, whether you are talking about semiconductors or whether you are talking about the finished product like an electric vehicle. I was going to talk about, I normally do this on stage. I pull this out and go, today a car is this with 4 wheels. But it is. It is this. And one of the slides I was going to add is I show the industrial revolutions. Industrial Revolution number 1. My town is famous, Tipton. The first commercial steam engine, James Watt and Matthew Bolton, installed it in Tipton. It's still there in the Black Country Museum. That's my only claim to fame. And now we're into Industrial Revolution 4.0. The gap, though, is shrinking. It's gone from like 130 years to 70 years to 20 years, and now the cognitive revolution, 5.0, is less than 10 years away. If you go into manufacturing facilities in the UK, I guarantee, and in Canada, in the US, they're struggling to adapt to 3.0, the computerization of our industries. Yet, if you go to places like in China and other parts of the world, they're already embracing 4.0. They've got 60 cities in 2019 in December in China had full 5G. 60, 59 actually. North America doesn't have one complete city that's running 5G. Not one. North America, US and Canada. You have pockets of 5G. You don't have full 5G. They're already working on 6G. This kind of conversation has to be elevated. OT cybersecurity, IT cybersecurity. People get kind of narrow-minded and focused on IT cybersecurity or on the vehicle. A vehicle doesn't kind of pop out of the air. A vehicle is assembled. It has a supply chain, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. OT cybersecurity is critical, making sure that a part hasn't been compromised in tier 3, that comes to tier 2, that comes to tier 1, and then gets assembled. Like, these are conversations that we're struggling with, and I'm pretty sure it's probably the same over here as well. Let me go through to global standards. WP29, great, critical, protecting data. The new ISO SAE standard 21434, probably more beneficial. It's the first one the auto sector's been given to support the supply chain somewhat, but the assembly of parts. But we need more. I don't have it here, but the US has just announced that if you're supplying to the defense sector, you need to have a certain level of cybersecurity certification done. Canada's about to launch that next year. It's going to be called CP-CSC, the Canadian Certification for Cybersecurity. And so if you're trying to provide parts to the Canadian Defence Organization's industry, you must be certified to X in cybersecurity. I think it's phenomenal. I'm not about regulations. I spent 20 years in the real world before joining the trade association. I don't like some of these government policies that push down your throats. But on cyber, it needs to be pushed down your throats. And so I'm now in conversations with the Minister of Innovation and Trade in Canada, Minister Champagne, to say, can we look at doing this for the automotive sector as well, please? Just like it's been done for CSR and ESG. You know, if you're in the auto sector and you want to, you know, provide parts to the auto global companies, you have to reach a level of X in CSR and ESG. We need to do it in cybersecurity as well. So we're looking at developing something like that. And that's all I've got time to say, and I'm glad to have said it. Thank you very much.